Hello, friends. It's Binge O'Clock, the podcast where we watch something and then we talk about it. I'm Joy Selden, and I've seen almost everything.
I'm Danielle and Joy, and I've seen almost nothing.
And this week, we are taking a look at Almost Human episode 7.
Yep.
Oh, boy. I was like, I swear, it's 7? It's got to be 7, right?
Well, now, I only know that because now we're past that 6.5 that we discussed last week.
Oh, that's true. You have seen more than half of Almost Human. And this week we are taking a look at episode 7, Simon Says. There's just so much happens in this episode. I feel like we should have called this season So Much Happens, episode 10. But yes, so in this episode, during rolling blackouts from a solar flare, Kennex and a half-charged Dorian, bless, attempt to stop a murderous live streamer as he terrorizes people who have wronged him. And when Kennex gets personally targeted, can Dorian use what little power he has left to save his partner? The answer is yes.
The answer is always yes when it comes to can Dorian do X? Yes.
Yes. Dorian, like the tech in this show, I feel like is a lot of plot filler. We need something to happen. I think Dorian's just gonna, he's just gonna scan some faces. He's just gonna send a report to Rudy. He's just going to know that there was warm blood on a floor an hour ago. He's just gonna know it's footsteps through a sneaker. It's fine.
You know the one thing he can't do? Regulate his emotions when his power is below 60%.
Right? Oh my goodness.
We will get into that. We will.
Yes.
But first,
I highly recommend watching this episode for fans of Dorian because, oh man, he comes out swinging literally, and it's kind of amazing to watch. But first, what were the police not prepared for this week, Danielle?
Oh, loads. So much. This certainly was an episode where the police were wildly unprepared. I feel like it's been a little while since we've had one of those. They've had a good run.
They've had a good run, or they've had to deal with smarter than the average bear criminal who may not have necessarily had the tech, but who just outthought them. But this week was very tech heavy. I think you said you had bullet points for a whole page worth of tech.
Pages worth of bullet points, which some of them we've shifted to later in this podcast episode. That's fine. You know what?
Fine. Let's
start with, what should we start with, Joy? The knockout spray, the fentanyl oxide, the first thing we see.
Yes, the fentanyl oxide.
The button-sized cameras that you're obsessed with.
I am obsessed with those button-sized cameras. Look, if I could outfit my home with tiny button-sized cameras, that would be an automatic security system, and I would live happy and paranoia-free. Or I would constantly be checking the feed to see what's going on in my own house. It's hard to know.
Hard to know. It's one of those things where it's great when you have it. It's really bad when the murderous live streamer has it.
Yes. And there is a murderous live streamer who is just, oh man. They hired a gentleman who, you put him in a hoodie and, you put the hair in front of his face and all of a sudden he's a creepy stalker.
Oh, boy.
And it's fine.
He also outfitted his victims with bomb collars, which actually I think the police department did a reasonably good job with, right? They were able to disarm 2 out of 3 of the bombs that they came across. They also had the bomb shields, which were very cool.
Oh, the bomb shield was so neat. The collar bomb, I think they've definitely come across before. Just because they seem to have protocol and they seem to sort of know what they were doing and how they were going to do it. The unfortunate thing, though, is just like every delicate procedure like that, approximately how long it's going to take. So the first time we see it, they don't get there in time. And it's like, we've got less than a minute to defuse this bomb, and this is a minimum of 5 minutes. It's not going to happen. So they put up this individual shield, and it's fine. There's not even debris.
Yeah, that was very strange to me.
Why would a police department... Actually, I think you brought this up when we were discussing it, because my thought was, why would a police department have something that could take away all the evidence like that? And what you said was...
What I said was maybe that was built into the bomb collar. And the villain, Simon, built the bomb collar to DNA bomb his victims. I was trying to come up with a delicate way of saying it, and there wasn't one.
I mean, it's a bomb collar. It's some Saw nonsense. Simon is also some weird cross between, the Saw movies and Fear.com, which if you've ever seen Fear.com, look, I enjoy it heartily. It's one of my favorite weirdly, paranormal slasher fics for some reason, without having like it's a ghost story wrapped in the internet, which I'm always just like very here for. But it's like if the guy from Saw was live streaming him killing people. Meanwhile, that guy was like, no, I want to teach you a lesson. I don't want to be malicious about it. It's just this weird combination of things to create Simon.
Oh, super. And the show, I know this isn't technically tech, but you know what? We're in it. So let's talk about it. The show does kind of an interesting thing with Simon, which upon reflection, I think I liked because he had all of these reasons for what he was doing, which obviously we nor the police department in this show condone. But they let him list all of the reasons that he was doing what he was doing, and they let him explain why the system that allows both him and Kennex to exist is unfair. But I don't think at any point in that episode they made him a sympathetic villain, and I liked that.
Yeah. You hear about all the issues he's had, but at no point are you like, it's not a Batman origin story. Like, nobody killed his parents. Like, he's just had a little run of bad luck, and he's decided to choose murder. And the police department is like, no.
What if you didn't choose murder?
What if you weren't a jerk?
He points it out to Kennex at the end of the episode when Kennex is, bomb-collared himself and on the bench. And he points out basically that he was trained to become a police officer, which is why he knows how to build the bombs in the first place, because he was in the bomb squad. And that's why he knows how to use things like the trash data to find information about John. But the reason he was kicked out of the police department is because of his, as Maldonado says, his psych issues.
It's almost like if you're a murderous psychopath, they don't let you be a cop or something.
Right. But then, of course, he throws that in Kennex's face because he's like, well, you had all of these psych issues and they ignored all of yours, and now you're a perfectly wonderful police officer. And he's trying to say that if they had ignored my psych issues and given me a second chance, I could have been like you. Which, spoilers, no, because you're a murderer.
You're also a murderer. Also, I know we've gone so far off topic, but I do have to mention that Kennex in that scene is hilarious to me because he's chill. He doesn't blink. He doesn't bat an eye. This, this murderer is talking to him, and meanwhile he's trying to defuse a bomb that's on his frickin' neck, and he's just like, I don't know, man. I'm getting kind of excited myself. Do you want to talk about it? Let's talk about our issues, man. Like, come on. And I'm just like, what?
Kennex. Kennex is such a professional.
It's one word for it.
One word for it. Okay, bringing it back to technology. We mentioned the bomb shield. They also the police officers successfully use a localized EMP to stop Ramon's car. Very cool. Also very scary.
Also very scary. Basically just an EMP gun pointed at his engine. It was weird. And, their car is totally fine.
Yes, their car is fine, but his car and everything in it, including the data recorder, gets fried. So it fries just the car and all the things in it. Wait, but not the bomb collar.
But not the bomb collar. Whoops. We found one.
Runs on electricity.
We found one. Well, maybe he was using the same police frequency so that it couldn't deactivate the...
No! That's not how this works.
I know, it's not how it works at all. We're going to hand wave it because the show obviously hand waved it.
Okay, and then let's end on the dark net as something the police department was wildly unprepared for. They, by the way, defined the dark net as an unpatrolled area of the internet.
It's fine.
Is it, Joy?
It's not
So when Valerie and Maldonado are talking about this, I can't even remember which one asks and which one answers. I think Maldonado says, shouldn't someone be monitoring for murder? Because this person is live streaming murders on the darknet. And Valerie goes, they are, they just can't keep up. You'd be surprised how many get off on this live violence.
It's so gross. But also, like, this is the internet conversation, like, since the internet started and since, you know, video games started and things like that, where people just, you know, like, some people come here for, like, the old days of the Roman Colosseum where you got to see people tear each other to shreds. But
here's what doesn't make sense. It's an unpatrolled area of the internet. There should be an entire department of cyber experts. There should be computer programs, not even people. Like, people's eyes, biological eyes, shouldn't need to watch the screens. They should just have either a computer program that can just automatically look for this sort of thing, maybe find comments about death, about killing, about any of that, and flag those comments immediately so that you can get brought to the live stream that is the terrible thing. Or maybe it's just an android. Maybe it's an entire department of androids, because androids don't need sleep. They just need to be charged, who are plugged directly into the wall and watching the darknet.
Yeah, like a laptop that you are just plugged in all the time on.
Yes.
And it flags everything for you. And then maybe a person checks it every 24 hours or something. Or rotation of
or, you know, Maldonado gets a little ping. Bing! Someone on the internet is being... None of this makes sense. The police were unprepared, I guess.
The police were so unprepared. I feel like, Danielle, the entire time you were watching this, you were just like, none of it makes any sense. I'm going to claw out my eyes. What is happening?
There should be an easy fix for this, and it's so annoying that there isn't.
I know. There were just a couple of very small tech pieces. I know where you were like, there are drones everywhere.
Mm-hmm.
There are drones everywhere.
Everywhere. Surveillance is not an issue in this society.
That brings us to our episode-specific subject, which is basically the Earth has to be toast by 2048. Because, as Danielle's going to point out in a second, there's so much wrong that happens as a part of the entire thing, which I mentioned in the summary. A solar flare happens, and then they get these rolling blackouts in city-run organizations, like the police department. The police department, which has decided to run, I don't know, half their staff, a third of their staff, with robotic counterparts for their detectives and police officers who need to be charged. They need their batteries upgraded.
Right. So basically, these solar flares happen. They cause a ton of damage. It's
to
a little
something.
bit
to something. They don't say what.
It's a little unclear. But the police department has a protocol that's built to combat the solar flares. Not combat them, really, to just survive the aftermath of the solar flares. Yeah, exactly. And part of that protocol, which I thought was interesting, is those rolling blackouts. Because you would think that everyone would have power just saved, right? Just stored. And they do. There is auxiliary power stores, allegedly, in the episode. I think Richard, the energy marshal, mentions that there's auxiliary power. But
he sure does.
Only have so much auxiliary power. So what they do is they put the city on rolling blackouts, where basically they segment the city into parts, and each part gets to take a turn with the auxiliary power kind of on a rotating basis, so that everyone can keep their things partially charged for the entirety of, with the amount of time it takes to repair the damage from the solar flare. Again,
this is also
a
very unclear number. Like, I think the entire episode is something like 2 days?
Mm-hmm.
3 days? It's hard. It's kind of hard to know.
And it starts 6 hours after the solar flare.
It does. It starts 6 hours after the solar flare. So, like, we're still dealing with it, and then we're dealing with it for literally the rest of the time we're in the episode.
For 2.5 days, which is why they have to put people on these rolling blackouts, because they have auxiliary power. They don't have enough to power an entire city for 2.5 days.
Right.
Oh, that's wild. So our question is, what happened? What happens to the planet that solar flares are now a regular thing that the city has protocols for?
Right. And that seriously damage your ability to consume energy at your normal rate.
Which is a lot. They're using up a lot of energy on a daily basis.
I just love it's like we get solar flares and we have these rolling blackouts in place, but we're going to decide to have a half or a third or whatever of our police force run on batteries. It's fine. It's fine.
That was the only way that they could combat the criminals that were 400% worse, Joy.
The 400%. Right, I know. This was the only way they could do this.
The only way to deal with
I get a feeling our episode 14 is going to be a lot of like either revisionist history of trying to figure out what they could have done instead of having androids. Or a lot of like what happened in the next. Well, let's give it the benefit of the doubt. This came out in 2013. So what happened in the next 35 years to cause whatever it is that this is?
Right. Okay, so
and
the
what
solar
is the wall,
flares.
like what's beyond the wall? Like, is it a bunch of desert? Is it solar panels in the desert and the solar flare messed them up? Like what? The fanfics I will write.
I still maintain that this is like a middle wall, basically. That there's like a very, very center that is the District 1, right? I think that there's a center that is the District 1, and if there are 10 districts, this is like District 5. So there is a like somewhere out there where things are exponentially worse, and it's kind of like the beginning sequence of Terminator where the robots are stepping on human skulls. And then there's a center where the technology did actually fix everything.
We can hope.
We can hope. Well, okay, so the two more things in this episode that could kind of go both ways, I think. They could either show that this world, 2048, is much worse than the current Earth, or that the people in the show, have put things in place that basically stopped the world from getting as bad as it could have been. So one of those...
we paused it.
We paused it, right? We paused climate change so the world isn't going to end in 50 years. It's going to end in like 500 years, right?
Right.
And one of those things were the 3D printed flowers.
Yeah, so they 3D print these flowers. And initially when Danielle and I were watching this episode, I was just like, but are they still refrigerated? Like, are they quote unquote cut flowers? Because, we get to see them in like this van. And, it could be refrigerated, it could not be refrigerated. It's a little hard to tell. And Danielle did the legwork of looking at that scene again and going, no, what did you see in the store, Danielle? Which made me go,
was I the human who went frame by frame through that scene to see what the deal was with these flowers? The answer is yes.
She will do this for you. And this is why we make such good co-hosts, because I trust her to be like, did you notice this? And I'm like, no. Oh my God, what happened?
So they have the flowers standing in plastic frames and in little bulbs of plastic right after they're made. And when they're in the van, they're just in metal tins. So at no point is there soil or water. And the entire flower boutique has really sad pictures of flowers on the walls, may I just point out. But other than the sad pictures of flowers on the wall, the whole, quote, boutique is just walls of chemicals. So these are not organic flowers. These are purely synth flowers.
It's so depressing.
It is, but at the same time, should we... If we can 3D print flowers, maybe there are synth versions of foods that should not be available to us 12 months of the year. Like, it shouldn't be berry season for 12 months. These are growing somewhere and they're being brought to us, and that's using up a lot of energy and a lot of water that maybe shouldn't be used that way.
I mean, that Mad Max Fury Road desert beyond the wall, they need every drop of water they can get, and meanwhile, we're over here trying to grow asparagus.
Yeah, meanwhile, it's whatever season asparagus is not supposed to grow in. I actually don't know the answer to that question because I can go to the grocery store and get asparagus at any time of the year. But Meanwhile, it's, I don't know, June, and I can have asparagus.
Right.
Does asparagus grow in June? I don't know.
I don't know. This is where I need Nella to be on this call, so I know.
Could we look it up? Yes. Will we?
No.
No.
We will not. But no, and then there was a third thing that you saw that was just like, oh no, the planet must definitely be dead. And when you said this, I was like, oh no, that's really bad.
Okay, the third thing is not something I saw, it's something I heard. Because Kennex is sitting on the bench, he's got the bomb collar, and there's an ad playing in the background behind him. And it was an ad that mentioned omakase, which made my ears ping. Because it made me think, oh, Japanese food, are they going to get in a restaurant? Are they going to have noodles? But it wasn't it wasn't an ad.
You're so thirsty for those noodles.
I have a one-track mind sometimes. And it turns out the ad is an ad for Synth Sushi. It's the highest grade fish substitute on the market, and the scientist who created the synth sushi, according to the ad playing behind Kennex, is a Nobel laureate. So they have given a prize to this scientist for creating synthetic sushi, which means that either the ocean is so destroyed and polluted that they cannot eat fish anymore. In my head, that's what I've constructed, and that's why you would give this person a Nobel Prize. Or this is a person who acknowledges that the fishing industry is destroying our planet and our oceans, is causing an incredible amount of pollution. Maybe we shouldn't fish the ocean as much as we are, or we should be more careful about it. And so this scientist created synth sushi to give people something to eat that doesn't have to be farmed from the ocean.
That doesn't deplete the source. Mm-hmm. And I had that, and you shared that with me, and I went, oh no.
Which is it? I don't know. They don't tell me because it's just an ad. It's just an ad that plays in the background while Kennex is on the bench.
And to be fair, Kennex is on the bench for a good portion of this episode. Like, he's on the bench for, I would say, like, it's the act 5 or whatever. Like, he's on the bench for almost the entire act. Mm-hmm. They also dressed him up like a homeless person and gave him, like, a bottle.
Yeah, because they wanted, this is the worst part, okay? The reason they did that is because they wanted people to leave him alone while he was asleep and not to notice that he was literally chained to the bench. So good to know. Good to know that in 2048, they also didn't find a way to address homelessness or people who are experiencing it or support any of those humans.
This is a very surprisingly bleak outlook. However, though, there is a part of me that's like, sometimes you'll see something that's like 40 years in the future, we figured out, like when Star Trek aired, it was just like, oh yeah, 60 years in the future, we're not going to like need money anymore. You know what I mean? And it was...
like, oh, we don't need to find a way to feed people. We don't need to find a way to house people because we already have those things. These are the systems we created to support them. Yeah.
Exactly. And there's a part of me that's like, that's too fast. Because there are some sci-fi shows that do this very, very quickly in a very short span of time. And at least this show is like, you know what? We haven't figured out a solution to our healthcare issues. And, 35 years into the future, that kind of makes sense to me. I wouldn't have instant answers for that. Like, that would mean in a couple generations you will have like, that doesn't make sense.
Mm-hmm. So this is future, but not so future that the world is a utopia. Unless, of course, you live in District 1.
Unless you live in District 1 and you're fine.
And you're fine. Everything's fine.
And everything's fine.
Boy, this was bleak. What if we just smash cut right to SynthPride, Joy? Should we just smash cut right to SynthPride?
I think we need to. So, SynthPride sort of comes bursting out of the gate within the first few seconds of this episode, because the very first thing that Dorian does when we see him is punch Richard in the face. Because he hasn't had a full charge, and the first thing to go is his personality, what is it? Personality...
Matrix? I don't know what they call it.
Yeah, it's like his personality subroutine. And like the first thing, like he instantly gets grumpy and just flat out clocks Richard across the face.
He does.
Richard, and And Richard practically goes down. Like, this is a really hard punch. And Kennex is behind Dorian laughing. I'm just like, that's my boy. Look at him go.
Because Dorian has finally done what we have all been waiting to do for we have 6 episodes of this show.
All been waiting to see is Richard get punched in the face. I also appreciate that the next, after a little bit of an exchange, because poor Dorian is like, I'm sorry, that was unintentional. Are we cool? And Richard has to be like, yeah, we're cool. Just like, step back, man. Like, you just punched me in the face. Give me some room here. And then Kennex gets to say, I'll take a partially charged ER end over an MX any day, and like claps him on the back and takes him outside. Even though poor Dorian is still like, it's not fair, man. Like, as they're leaving. Yeah. But like, I know we keep comparing him to like episode 1 Kennex, but like it is such a far cry from where we were in episode 1, where they're like, he takes him by the shoulder outside. It's so precious.
It really is. And he's just so beautifully supportive of Dorian throughout this episode with every single person they come across. And every single person who questions Dorian, Kennex is there to say, absolutely not. I'm with him. We're going to be good.
Yes, except when they're alone together and Kennex is allowed to give him some flack because Dorian is just, he's so upset and he's ranting in the car and he's just like, they always give the MX priority and I feel like they're sitting in first class and I'm sitting in coach. And then Kennex goes on like a 30-second tirade about how crappy coach is. And Dorian has to be like, I'm talking about social injustice and you're talking about tiny bathrooms. Are you even listening to me? Like, don't mess around with me today, man.
All he wants is to live with Kennex and to be roommates with Kennex. All
he wants is his own space.
His own space. So he suggests the back room in Kennex's apartment. Unfortunately, the back room is already being used.
As a trophy room.
As a trophy room. Wait, can I add one more thing? As a trophy room for trophies that Kennex earned in high school. This is not a Division I something or other college team. This is a high school trophy room.
I mean, the character of Kennex is I imagine Kennex is as like approximately our age. Somebody in his maybe his mid-30s, early 30s, whatever. Like, he kind of flies off the handle a little bit, like a younger, towards the younger end. But like, oh man, it's like if you've got trophies from 20 years ago in a place of prominence.
Listen, if you want to keep your trophies, keep your trophies. But do you want an entire room dedicated just to those trophies?
You could have a workout room.
I question.
You could have a B&B. You could be making some extra money on the side. You could make it a new bedroom. You could make it an office. You have a trophy room from your high school thing. And he even goes off to be like, my records are still up at high school. You go there and you'll see my name all over the place. They used to call me the White Cheetah, and poor Dorian is falling asleep.
The White Cheetah!
I know. When we got to that part in the episode, Danielle sent to me in all caps, the White Cheetah. And I was like, I know, this is why I wanted to watch this one with you. Specifically.
And he even does that thing where he's mimicking the crowd, applauding as he steps onto the football field. Cheetah, cheetah, cheetah. Dorian falls asleep in the middle of the story, so Kennex wakes him up and then tells the story again because he really wants Dorian to know that he was the White Cheetah.
That he was the White Cheetah.
What a great scene.
What else was there? There were a couple of other things. He gets to stand up to Richard again on Dorian's behalf, even though Dorian is kind of like, just trying to do that thing where it's like, and everybody has this in any job. I think probably cops get it more than most, where you have to be at the top of your game. Otherwise, your colleagues won't necessarily respect you, or, it's I do think there's an environmental aspect to the way that Dorian's like, no, I need to be here. I need to be doing my job. And at the same time, it's like, dude, your voice is modulating and it's weird and off-putting.
Yep. Your face is flashing in 2 different colors instead of your usual one. Because
yeah, Kennex even says like disco face, really?
He can't stop punching things.
He can't stop punching things. And hugging. He has to hug.
It's so cute.
He has to hug. They save a victim from a bombing, and the first thing he does is, like, drag Kennex and the poor girl who's just survived a bombing into a hug, and I'm just like, oh no.
Can we discuss, though, how everything that we have discussed so far is happening to Dorian when he was above 48%?
Yes.
I just, I think that if all of this was happening when he is below 20, say, and your phone is going into low power mode, that's one thing. But when low power mode kicks in, when you are at 50 to 60%, I feel like maybe that wasn't built well.
Right?
Because then what's the 50 to 60% for?
Well, there's one of those things where, like, I think you could push through. I think it's weirdly like people, right? Like if you get a solid night's sleep and let's say you start at 100% and then you get to maybe 50 or 60%, you can still kind of push through. I think if you don't get a good night's sleep and you start at like 70%, then that 50 and 60 and 40% really starts to hurt. Like every percentage counts.
No, that's fair, but they just make Dorian almost unable to do his job. Like, because I know there are all of those, things that are kind of silly. Like, he's changing colors, and his voice is modulating, and he's hugging people.
And his eyes are different colors.
And his eyes are different colors. But then there's also the 3 separate times where he mixes up information. Like, he's trying to tell Kennex which park to go to, and he gives the wrong name. He's trying to identify the device inside the bomb, and he misidentifies it. He's trying to tell Kennex what wire color to cut, and he gives the wrong color. Like, that's
that was a big one.
Yeah, if that's happening to you at 48%, I feel like that's an issue.
That's a fair point. I didn't realize that at the time. Yes, that's a very bad. That is very, very bad thing. I mean, but this is also like Maldonado is like, is it an issue? And like, and Kennex covers for him.
He does.
And Kennex is just like, nope, no issue here. And like, meanwhile, Dorian has an outburst as they leave the meeting. And Maldonado's like, are you sure everything's fine? And Kennex is like, yup. Look, he's tired, but he's fine. And I'm just like, is he though?
Is he though?
Is he though? What did I have? No, the only other thing I had, which isn't technically a SynthPride thing, I feel like it's more just a Dorian thing, but like, so Kennex brings him over to Rudy. They have to be at Rudy's anyway, and I'm sure Dorian was something like, can you do anything for me? Because I'm just bleeding energy. Mm-hmm. And Rudy hooks him up to this thing, and he calls it like an espresso shot, and meanwhile, Dorian's just like, I can't, are you sure this is like supposed to help? Like, he's not getting anything out of it. And Kennex kind of like pulls Rudy to the side and is just like, should I be worried? And Rudy's like, no, this has nothing to do with the reason the DRN, like, this is just a personality thing. And then he's like, but his mood swings might get worse. And then Dorian throws something at the two of them and says, humans off.
Which was excellent. And, despite any qualms that Dorian had about that mini-sized charger espresso shot, he actually comes out of it feeling much refreshed. At which point, Kennex goes, hey, who's a happy toaster?
Oh, my God.
Who's a happy toaster?
Who's a happy toaster? And this is where you get the crossover with Battlestar Galactica.
True. But that scene was important not just because of that very cute nickname, but because that is where the seed is planted. Because Rudy says that, living at home is not all it's cracked up to be. You can build as many robotic butterflies as you want, but it gets really lonely. And Kennex remembers this when he asks Maldonado for a favor. Which is why the closing scene of this episode takes place back at Rudy's lab / domicile, I guess. I think he lives there.
I think he lives there too. But like, this is where I was trying to tell you, like, I don't know where Rudy is, but it's not the police precinct. It's like a warehouse where he's got a cot in the back. Like, I don't know what's happening with Rudy. But yeah, since Dorian is police property, he needs to be in the custody of the police department. So he needs to be under police supervision, which makes Rudy's warehouse perfect option and not the trophy room, because Kennex would never. But like, I just love Dorian's reaction too of like, this isn't what I had in mind. And I'm just like, at least you won't have to look at MXs every day, my dude.
Right. It's definitely better. I love how excited Rudy is in this scene.
So excited. So jazzed to be here. Just like, I can't wait for some hijinks to ensue.
Yep. Some crazy nights out on the town, as he says, we can take photos, put them up on the walls, talk to women. You can talk to women for me. No, your women are yours.
Your women are yours. It's like the weirdest, best line I think Rudy has had this whole time.
Is it better than our peanut butter and jelly, just two foods?
Our peanut butter and jelly, just two foods, yes. I mean, Rudy, yes, they are. But
no, they're a sandwich. No, but like, you see what I'm saying?
But like together, they make a... Never mind.
What a great scene.
They're absolutely precious, and I can't wait for them to happily domicile together. But I think that brings us to our one more thing.
Yes, it does. Do you want to go first?
Sure, I'll go first. My one more thing is Richard, but basically it's Richard and his relationship to his MX. Because, you know, Richard is like such a hard person when it comes to Dorian, and like he makes all these comments about the fact that like Kennex has a DRN and the DRN isn't like as good as the MX is and all this stuff, and then he turns to his MX and he's just like, where were you? Where were you when I got punched? Can you climb a wall like that? Like what? Think for yourself, damn it. And I think it is that weird like jealous bully thing where like you make fun of the thing you want, and there's something about that feels really weirdly endearing, and also I have an endless reservoir of petty for that. But yeah, so that's my one more thing. What is your one more thing?
Okay, my one more thing is a bundle of little things. My one more thing are just the little visual accoutrement that the show decides to sprinkle in order to convince you that this takes place in the future. And one of the things that happens in this episode, but actually has been happening since episode 1, are those lightsaber umbrellas, where the bit that you hold and then pops through the top of the umbrella is just a lit up whatever color it is. Those have shown up from episode 1 of this show, and I remember clocking it and thinking, oh, okay, we're in the future. But then they make a point... Is that where we are? Android partners, DSA? And yet they insist on sprinkling them. There's at least one umbrella per episode. And in this episode, the umbrella really stood out to me because the person walks by and there's not a drop of water in the sky or on the grounds. It is not, there's no rain. The umbrella is only here because it's the future. And the other little
maybe it was a sun umbrella. Maybe
it was nighttime. It is when Kennex is on the bench.
Nah, then I got nothing.
Kennex is on the bench and someone walks by with this lightsaber umbrella. It was great. It was in this episode. The robo investment advisors they put in the bank are in this episode. So when Ramon walks into the bank.
You mentioned that to me, and that was something that I had actually missed. And I think it's really interesting if they are robot investment bankers. What was it?
Investment advisors.
Investment advisors. I was like, well, what if this is like the Android or hologram equivalent of your browser questionnaire when you need to go see a banker or a doctor or something.
This is exactly what it is. This is so that people can walk into the bank and be like, oh, I have this much money. What should I do with it? And then the investment advisor will tell you what to do, I guess. Except now it's either, you know what, I don't know if it's a hologram, because they kind of just sneak it into the background of one of the scenes. And it almost looked like those holo doctors in the previous episode, except that it's an investment advisor. So that was in here. That one I actually liked. And a third little bit they snuck in is that Ramon, dear Ramon, was supposed to go on an orbit vacation with his wife.
Yes.
Did you know that everyday people in this series were space capable? Is that the word? Can travel into space?
Astronauts?
Astronauts?
I mean, no. I did not.
Welcome to 2048. The everyday human can traverse space.
I mean, I think the first thing you said to me was like, are they really doing this during a solar flare? And I think they weren't doing it immediately.
Well, see, the solar flares are unpredictable, so I guess the solar flare would have ruined their vacation anyway.
I guess. It's just such a weird thing.
It was a weird thing to sneak into this show 7 episodes in. Like, all of a sudden, we knew there were androids. We knew it was the future. We knew that, you know, advertisements were just flung up on walls via projectors. But we didn't know that space was a thing. And then they just snuck it in episode 7.
And then they just drop it. Like, yeah, you know, orbital vacation, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, what? Like, are you up in orbit the whole time? Is it like I have so many questions. Are there like orbital Hilton and Marriott's? Is there a spa? Is it?
What do you get to see? Is it so far out that you get to see the Milky Way from the outside the Milky Way?
I don't know. It's hard to say.
I mean, much like that ad that they play in the background of that bench scene, it's just they just drop it in there gently, and you're left with all the questions.
It's so true.
Which I'm not upset by.
I'm not that upset by it. I can't wait to see what happens in our episode 14, if we talk about this or not.
We are absolutely going to talk about this in our episode 14. With that, though, I think we are at the end of our episode 7.
Yes.
So
we've arrived.
We've arrived! Let me leave you by saying we would love to hear from you. Please check us out at Binge O'Clock Pod on Twitter and Facebook, where you can answer the question, if you went on an orbit vacation, who would you bring and why? You can also email us at bingeoclockpod@gmail.com.
Yes, and tell your friends, tell your family, tell your loved ones, tell the partially charged androids in your life about Binge O'Clock Pod, and we will see you next time.